We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The VUU, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Greetings. Welcome to another episode of the Voices of Unitarian Universalism, also known as the VUU, VUU, the weekly talk show brought to you by the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship, our congregation that goes beyond walls and spreads our love all over the world. It is so good to be here. My name is the Rev Dr Michael Tino. I'm 1/3 of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, coming to you from Peekskill, New York, a little bit north of New York City, on the land of the Kitchewan and Wappinger bands of the Lenape Nation. And it is fall here in Peekskill. It has turned chilly at night, and pretty soon we'll have color on our trees. We've just gone through 3 or 4 days of rain from Tropical Storm Ophelia, which hopefully will sink in and fill up our reservoirs. I love fall. I am a fall person. I went and got cider donuts, and we'll have pumpkins soon, and it'll all be good. Asia Hauser, how are you?
Hi, I'm Asia Hauser, and I am on the land of the Coast Salish people, the Muckleshoot, Duwamish, Quamish, Puyallup. It's a group of indigenous folks who were here for a very long time, also known as Seattle, Washington. And I miss the East Coast and the fall. I mean, we have some changing of the leaves here in Seattle, but not anything like New England and the Northeast, and just the magic of the fall. We've also had torrential, usually here in Seattle, we don't get torrential rain. We usually just get the regular, we get rain, but the last 2 days, We have had torrential downpours, and I'm always grateful for rain because we need water to survive. It's just survive. Water is life, right? And I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling good. And we are very excited about our guest. But I'm gonna send it back. Oh, send it back to Michael so we can talk about UU Roundup, or invite our very special guest to talk about UU Roundup as well.
Yeah. So usually we start just with a little what's going on in the world of Unitarian Universalism. We call it the UU Roundup. I know that the Liberal Religious Educators Association are preparing to meet in Milwaukee for their fall conference, and I know lots of people who are really excited to be going. And Aisha Hauser, you are attending virtually this year, or?
Oh, that's probably what I should do. I settled about going, and then I realized, oh yeah, I can attend virtually. I have ended my term as president, and we are very privileged to have Catherine Childs as the new Laredo president, and so I am going to be staying home. The only reason why I might not join virtually is I took a role as acting vice president of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility at a college at Shoreline Community College north of Seattle for a temporary time. And it is filling up my days. I'm basically working 7 days a week. So that's fun. Who needs sleep?
I don't know, not me. And you are doing some training in Our Whole Lives, our comprehensive sexuality education.
Yes, next weekend, October 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, I will be in Colorado at the Foothills Congregation, one of our larger congregations, co-leading with Lynn Young, Our Whole Lives adult, young adult, and older adult training, with sexuality education, which is one of my favorite things that Unitarian Universalism has done. And I want to just humble brag that my colleague here, Rev Dr Michael Tino, is one of the authors of the Young Adult Our Whole Lives curriculum. Golf clap.
Yeah,
so
which we wrote now 17 or 18 years ago, so it really could use a good update.
I think they're working on it.
Our understandings of things change in 17 or 18 years. We have new language. We have new ways of thinking about things. It's all good. What else is going on in the Unitarian Universalist world? I have missed a little bit of the VUU this season. Last week I was with the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, which is the Unitarian Universalist committee that credentials ministers and keeps folks in right relationship with our association. And we just passed, after 5 years of work, a comprehensive overhaul of the preliminary fellowship processes, which means nothing if you're not a fellowship Unitarian Universalist minister. But it's when people are admitted into fellowship after many years of study and lots of hard work, they are admitted to preliminary fellowship for a period of time, during which they have to continue to submit paperwork to the committee. And we're tired of having preliminary fellowship be seen as like a second class status of ministry, right? Or like we're giving you 3 years to make sure that we made the right decision admitting fellowship. It's just not the way the system should work. So we worked really hard to eliminate vestiges of white supremacy culture and ableism, institutionalized ableism from this system.
Can you give us some of the highlights of the changes? Maybe a couple things that would be.
Yeah, so we're focusing more on development, professional development plans, and ministers have always had to submit one, but it was like an afterthought. By the way, here's like the books I'm going to read. And really what we want is for people to engage in a process of reflection that leads to a well thought out development plan, right? That's what we want. So that's going to actually be the development plan is going to be the centerpiece, and not evaluations from supervisors and congregations.
That's awesome, because I've always maintained the process should be hard, but it's been hard in the wrong ways, in the ways that I don't think have served even the participants, let alone Unitarian Universalism.
And the other highlight is that we're recognizing that ministry comes in a lot of different forms and flavors, and not just the old system was pretty narrowly tailored to a certain kind of parish ministry and a certain kind of not even like as well, not even like everyone's parish ministry. It was like a certain kind of I'm called to serve a congregation full-time ministry. And like when I was first in preliminary fellowship, I was called to serve a congregation full-time. So I breezed through it because it was made for me. But the farther you are from that model, the less it works for you. And right now there are people who are founding nonprofit organizations and doing amazing work in our world and doing all sorts of chaplaincy work in different settings. Finding the places where our hurting world needs Unitarian Universalism and bringing it there. And like the old systems don't fit that. So.
Well, kudos to you and the work on that and everyone who worked on it, because I think that is part of the beauty of our faith, is that we give ourselves the opportunity to examine, re-examine, even our institutions that felt immovable just a few years ago. So that's huge.
That's been forwarded to the UUA board because ministerial fellowship rules have to be approved by the UUA board.
And they're meeting soon, the UUA board?
I don't know.
The elect board is meeting.
What? I haven't been on the UUA board in almost 10 years, so I don't pay that much attention to it anymore.
Our board is meeting. Church of Larger Fellowships board is meeting this weekend, starting tonight.
It is, and that'll be a good time. We have a great board.
We do.
So let's bring on our guest, shall we?
Yes.
We have with us this week the Reverend Dr. Gregory Carrow-Boyd. Greg is a religious educator credentialed at the leadership level. He serves our UU congregation in Honolulu, Hawaii, as the executive minister of religious education. He also serves our wider association as a member of the General Assembly Advisory Council. I don't even know what that is, so we're going to ask Greg. Greg loves to dance and to spend time with the special young people in his life. In his free time, Greg conducts research about and writes religious education, racial justice, and sexuality education curricula. And we are so glad it is before or just after now 6 o'clock in the morning in Honolulu, Hawaii, and we are so glad Greg is able to be with us. Bless you, dear one, for getting up before dawn. And we brought you here mostly to talk about UU responses to disaster relief following the horrendous wildfires in Lahaina, Maui. But let's start with the General Assembly Advisory Council. What is that, Greg?
I can do that, Michael. So the General Assembly Advisory Council is something that our wonderful Director of General Assembly and Conference Services, Latanya Richardson at our UUA, put together last year. It is a kind of new response to having the General Assembly Planning Committee that used to have decision-making authority over every single thing that happened at GA or large swaths of it. This time it is purely a staff advisory council where, okay, what's the history of this? Why are we doing this thing? Those types of things. So it was really awesome to serve with folks like the Reverend Mark Lee Belizaire and Meg Riley made meetings. Reverend Elizabeth Mount, also on the Board of Trustees, was able to make meetings. Various folks from the different care teams. It was really a kind of, all right, we know that things happen for a reason, and we know that they happen a certain way. Let's vet everything we say before we put it out in public to make sure that we have the widest possible understanding of how this might impact folks before we even send it out. And so it was a lovely experience this past year. whether or not it continues into this year, I haven't received any information just yet, but I'm prayerful that it will, because I definitely enjoyed the experience, and I think that Latanya benefited well from having a dedicated group of people to be able to bounce ideas off of or ask curious questions about why didn't this land the way that we thought it was going to, yada yada.
Excellent. Well, that seems like the best parts of the General Assembly Planning Committee, without the you all have to make site visits to convention centers and that sort of nonsense. And I know that you were on the General Assembly Planning Committee before being on the UA board, and so I'm glad that you're still serving in that capacity.
And brings me joy. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Someone asked me about being plugged into like what's going on in the UU world, and I have like so thoroughly plugged out of so many things because I'm trying to really focus on this work that I'm doing on the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. And I'm like, I'm just sort of plugged out of so many things. I'm like, oh, that's new. Tell me about it. But let's talk about responses to the disaster in Hawaii. How are Unitarian Universalists connected to the response and helping the people there?
Yeah, wonderful. So, again, I'm Greg. I noho au malakamakuni o Oahu. I live on the island of Oahu. I've been studying Hawaiian since I moved here. It is the land of the native Hawaiians who are still here. That is not the name that they gave themselves. They just call themselves Na Hawaii, the Hawaiians. And they're very much still here, 150,000 strong after 300,000 at the point of European contact back in the 1700s. The UU response has been absolutely tremendous, especially in the early weeks. We're entering week 8 post wildfires. It was August 8th when the fires first started swiftly moving, and it took us a few weeks to get things under control. One of the things I think is important sometimes is, while most of the damage was on Maui, there were wildfires on other islands. Particularly, there were some on the Big Island and the island of Hawaii. There were also infrastructural damage that happened to other islands. So, like Molokai is serviced by a cell phone tower that was in Lahaina, right? So damage that happened on Maui affected other smaller islands like Lanai and Molokai. Lanai is privately owned, but Molokai actually has residents that live on it. So it's been a huge shock to our system. We're certainly continuing to cover it all the time. But I had colleagues, I had congregations still reaching out to me, still reaching out to our congregation about how to help. Early on, I advised to make sure that funding went to the UU Disaster Relief Fund, because our congregation will be applying for a grant. Grants of up to $50,000 are available for projects that help us work with other first responding groups. Our congregation specifically decided to be second wave responders, because we know that this is going to be a multi-year recovery effort, and that a lot of the money and assistance would come in within the first weeks and months. We're in here for the long haul, because these are our folks over on the neighbor islands. Maui is a 35-minute flight from Oahu, and it's about 80 land miles if we could just walk across, or just move across very easily that way. So that's the work that we're doing. But I've got to say, just the letters, the voicemails, the personal connections were so helpful, because things were moving very, very quickly at first. They've settled a little, but there's so much more to do. We know that over 100 people died. This is our deadliest wildfire in the history of the islands. It's the deadliest wildfire in the history of the nation, as far as we know as well. And people have started going back to their homes in the burn zone just in the past couple of days. The government has cleared folks to do that, but the air might still be toxic. We don't know how poisoned the groundwater is. There are animals that lost their lives too, and we don't know what it's like for them to rehabitat those places. And because we're so geographically isolated, much of our economy, especially the economy of Maui, is dependent on tourism. So the governor has opened up the island to tourism again starting October 8th. And this is mainly to save jobs of people on Maui. But it's not really a great time to do that. And so here's how capitalism and environmental racism are coalescing to create an even more seductive problem that we have to figure out how to face boldly and in a values-based way.
Can you this is where I feel like because there is that tension, but it's tension that was created by colonization. I mean, there, this need for tourism has been created by what especially entities like Dole and people who in just ravish the land. Here's where I would say reparations comes in. Like, there should be no reason that Hawaii has to open up for Maui or any part for tourism, really anytime, but especially after something like this. And my radical self, like, the government should be handing over money instead of saying we need to open for tourism. That's the only way a place so harmed and damaged as a result of climate change. I mean, there's so many dots to connect here. But Greg, I'm curious about the discourse about tourism, because it's so insidious. But what is it that you're hearing from folks who are I hate saying both sides about anything, but there doesn't seem to be consensus among, because I try to follow I'm on TikTok, Hawaii people from Hawaii's indigenous people, and there doesn't seem to be consensus about whether or not people should be going there.
Yeah, I get this question routinely. It was not one of the ones that I anticipated getting when I relocated here to serve this congregation, and I'm hoping to continue here and establish it as my home as I learn more and more about the culture. There isn't consensus. There is a loud group of Native Hawaiian and Hawaiian activists that are saying, "Don't come here. Don't vacation here. You don't need to do this. You don't need to do that." And the fact of the matter, this is one of 3 states that is majority POC. We're about 40% Asian. Our largest multiracial group is triracial, Native Hawaiian, Asian, and white. And there are a variety of different perspectives. The majority of our legislature is also people of color and indigenous people, both Native Hawaiians and folks from other Polynesian islands who have genetic ancestry ties that go back thousands and thousands of years. If you've seen the movie Moana, you understand how Polynesians populated all the various islands. It's only lightly altered from the true history of the people and how they got here. Right. No less musical either. I'm not going to lie about that. There was a lot of singing as they sailed across all those islands using celestial navigation. Polynesians are the best celestial navigators in the world. So yeah, all this is to say, there's not one perspective on this. I'm generally I would love us not to be so dependent on tourism that's been a byproduct of runaway capitalism and imperialism. I lived in Los Angeles for 7.5 years before I relocated here. And what that experience taught me about, in a way that I didn't experience growing up in central Pennsylvania, is what it really means to live in an occupied space. Southern California and many parts of the West are definitely still occupied Mexico. The culture is often very different than the government structures that are there. Here, as we move further and further west in the Indigenous Erasure Project, right, we just kind of run out of steam. Like, they were never able as fully to wipe out the Native Hawaiians, not for lack of trying. Well, let's be clear, not for lack of trying. They declared war. They outlawed hula. They outlawed the language. The language has only been legal to teach in school since 1984. It was banned since 1898. Yeah. It's very recently we are undoing, mostly through third and fourth generation folks who grew up without speaking Hawaiian in the home, revitalizing the culture. Now Hawaiian is one of the native languages of this place. All legal documents are also published in Hawaiian. It's a really tremendous story of indigenous revitalization efforts. Along with that comes, again, for thousands of years pre-European contact, folks were able to live here sustainably and in ways that didn't require anyone coming except for occasionally other Polynesians. There is a way that this land, these islands that have animacy, according to Native Hawaiian spirituality, can live in harmony. There are ways to not overfish. There are ways to keep the oil on the ground. There are all branches of the military are here, again, because this is an occupied space. This is the only state capital I've ever lived in where it is rare to see a U.S. flag. You see U.S. flags on the military bases and at the state capitol because it is a state capital. But I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also a state capital. Many more U.S. flags in that place than are here. So all of this gives us a sense of place. Just to answer the question again, no, there's not one definitive perspective on whether tourists should be coming here. What I usually state, again, as someone who's been here for a few months, the way that I understand what's being portrayed, even by the folks that are most vocally saying don't come here, is it is different if you're coming here for a vacation in Waikiki versus coming here to learn about the culture, learn the language, to repair harm done by hundreds of years of European colonization, imperialism, and mistreatment. Learning about the fact pineapple doesn't come from Hawaii. All right. Pineapple is a Caribbean fruit. It was brought over here by the Portuguese. The Hawaiian word for pineapple, halakahiki, actually means foreign fruit because they brought it over by accident. It just grows really well here. So, if you're coming here to learn that stuff, there's a different perspective on whether you should be here at all, or if you can, all right, you stay. And I'm also going to be point blank. They're mostly talking to white folks. A lot of y'all don't have any reason to be here, again, unless you've been invited. But wait for that invitation. It might not ever come.
Ooh, it might not ever come.
That's deep.
Listen, I appreciate the framing of living on occupied land and pointing out how Mexican Southern California is. That blew my mind a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I never lived in Southern California. I've never lived anywhere in California, but I visited Southern California quite a few times, different places. And it is an occupied. That is deep. You've said a lot of deep things, Greg. Deep thoughts by Greg. And it is different, isn't it?
And so in terms of the wildfires and the recovery, you're now in that period where sustaining the energy is everyone's like, oh, wildfires, help, we're gonna help, and then it's 8 weeks later and everyone's like, oh, what happened in Hawaii? And if people are just going back to see what remains of houses, there's going to be a lot of need there. I mean, I have a friend who just returned from a deployment with the Red Cross. She's a disaster mental health psychologist. So she was providing mental health services to people, and she's like, it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm getting a little context for why, if people are just coming back to their homes, I'm just so what kinds of things are the folks in Honolulu hoping to provide? You said you wanted to apply for a grant to be second responders. What's the hope?
Yeah, so the largest organization doing this work, the Hawaii Community Foundation, Maui Strong Fund, which had $1 million within 2 days and continues to get money, has just switched. They have a 4-phase plan, and they've just switched to the second phase, which is much more about resilience and sustainability. We're in all the work we're trying to do, we're trying to get ready for the next disaster, right? There will always be a next disaster. And so we're trying to prepare for that. What we found out, and I didn't anticipate this because disasters on the continent work in a slightly different pattern, cash is still needed. When we were sending a lot of supplies, some of those supplies ended up not being used, or the more perishable ones, waited and waited for weeks or spoiled and those types of things. What's really needed still is cash. So, I say this because this is an easier way for people on the continent to help out. You don't have to come here. You don't have to deploy people. Obviously, if you're a medical professional or you work in mental health care, whether or not you have a board certification through a medical organization, you might have a different type of certification. Folks like that are needed. You can always connect with the Maui Strong Fund folks. They'll get you to some of the other mutual aid organizations. There are a bunch of organizations on the island of Maui and throughout our chain of islands that are continuing to coordinate need and resources. And so that's working well. And I think you pointed out, Michael, one of the things that we see in Hawaiian culture in particular is there's a cultural stoicism, right? There's a kind of we'll get through this. And so the depth of the mental health need is not yet known, and might not be known for quite a while, because again, culturally, it's not something that comes to the fore very quickly. So there are going to be a variety of different needs, but cash can help with all of those things, and that is not generally been my approach to disaster recovery, but that's what I'm hearing is needed. And obviously, through the UUA Disaster Relief Fund, the way I understand how those funds get distributed, I might be wrong, is not that we can just give cash. So we're specifically looking to partner with organizations that are doing some of that. How are you coordinating the work? How can we assist you maybe on the management side of that type of work? So we'll see what's needed. We're still working that through our Social Justice Council in terms of what we have capacity to do, but the money is there. All we ever have to do is apply for it, and I've contacted the folks at the fund to know that we are planning to apply for it. So it's just a matter of us getting to those funds rather than not being able to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I so appreciate just the honesty of like send cash. I mean, I have to say, people are like, well, we want to send hand knit baby blankets and like bottles of water, and the folks in Hawaii are like, no, actually, just cash would be good, thank you. So.
The schools are
And that's
operating,
so
the
realistic.
healthcare is operating, all the stuff, right? Like it's a state. It's this is for better or worse. We've got a lot of U.S. federal infrastructure really coming to bear, and again, that's occupied space. So the military is already here. Our delivery pipeline for getting those needs met quickly was already here. Many of the bases are here on the island of Oahu, but there are military bases on the island. So there's ways to make sure that we have what we need. And we did. Both the governor and the president worked very effectively together very quickly to get FEMA here, to get cash here, to get the resources here. And we have an indefinite promise of that type of aid. I think of that in counterpoint to ongoing recovery from Hurricane Maria on the island of Puerto Rico. And it's a very different response, different administration, different relationship to this imperialist beast we call our nation.
Well, and Hawaii is a military strategic. I mean, that's why we even are there, even from when it began. So I have a total snarky question. Was were Oprah and The Rock dragged as badly in Hawaii as they were here for, they can each write a check to help, I don't know. It felt so, I don't know. What was, or do you even know what I'm talking about? They put out this
I do, I
video.
do.
Yeah.
It was not quite as bad here because like we were in it, like we were aware, we know they live there. Celebrities living on island is not such a rare thing. Like there's a lot of love for Jason Momoa, who is an island boy, and all that good stuff. But the rumor mill that this is even making the rounds on public radio, like there was there were a lot of rumors going around that like Oprah and The Rock were like burning down Maui so that they could increase the sizes of their cities. Yes,
Oh
yes,
my
these are
God.
actual rumors that perpetuated, and that like
Yikes.
FEMA is trying to manage. They are trying to manage these particular rumors. So no, the dragging wasn't quite as bad, but obviously the awareness that they could have helped more and more quickly
Yeah.
is known. And again, this is a space that culturally, historically, is used to taking care of itself, and so the gears of mutual aid just clicked into fever pitch so quickly, like same day. There are people in the burn zone helping other people out of the burn zone while the fires are actively burning down things, right? So it is much more quickly than I've seen that response in some other places. And again, that's one of the reasons that this is a place that is prepared. We have a 2 to 3 day uh, survival strategy if we're ever cut off from the continent, right? Like we are trying to get more and more self-sustaining out here because we cannot be dependent on shipping and planes in times of increasing climate change and climate disaster. So we're exercising that more and more as we learn how, as we start to grow more and more of the staple crops, many things that Native Hawaiians traditionally ate, like sweet potato, specifically like purple sweet potato and taro, are not mostly grown on island. They are imported, and this is a problem. This is a real problem.
So just agriculturally, the colonizer crops have pushed out the food that indigenous people have survived on for tens of thousands of years there.
Yep, and that's one of the things that's implicated in the Maui wildfires in particular. Grass from other places. Our grass doesn't get as dry, so it doesn't burn as easily. Certainly wildfires do happen here naturally. These are volcanic islands. It's there was an eruption on the Big Island just a couple weeks ago, right? Like this is a place that is actively still forming. The actual ninth island, we lovingly refer to Las Vegas as the ninth island because Hawaiians love Vegas. It is actually the place with the third most Hawaiians in the world. LA, then Honolulu, then Vegas. It's easy to live there, so lots of families, as they're getting priced out of being able to live on the island, relocate to other population centers of Hawaiians, which are mostly LA County and Las Vegas.
And Lahaina is on the dry side of Maui, right? So, I mean, I'm just guessing that if wildfires happen on Maui, they tend to happen on that side of the island.
Yes. So the record shows that, and obviously something that sometimes gets lost is we forgot that there was the hurricane at the same time, right? So there were hurricane force winds that were propelling the fire even faster than normal. If only one of those things have happened, the disaster would not nearly be the scale that it is. But this is the nature of climate change. We can have simultaneous climate-related events at the same time, and it's going to be this is normal now. This is normal now. So how do we deal with that?
Greg, I have a question about one of the things that we heard about, and I don't know if this was part of the rumor mill or how pervasive this was, but already there were, I'm going to call them ghouls, people who wanted to, kind of predators to buy people's homes. So is there I mean, one of the things I picture UUs doing is like call the state legislature in Hawaii, like put a I don't know if there's a way to legally protect folks from being preyed upon by ghouls trying to take advantage of a horrific situation. And I'm wondering if there's any attention paid to that.
Yeah, this is active in our state legislature right now, and with our governor Josh Green, who's doing a great job, but also in a lot of different circumstances that sometimes we don't have to make these decisions in after a disaster. So there was a plan. We had actually just passed a law that would make it easier to go around certain environmental regulations to build more housing. We're like many high market housing areas where I like to say this again about LA because the housing scenario is so similar out here. In LA, very frequently, there was not always so much a housing shortage as there was an affordable housing shortage. And some things are similar here. There are actually fewer houses than we need for bodies here. Some of that has to do with cultural perspectives on how we live together. Polynesian cultures in general have more generations in smaller spaces. That's just a cultural product that they bring. It's not good, bad, right, wrong. It's just a thing, right? And so that's meant that over decades we have not kept up with rising size of population, especially as more people have relocated from the continent or from other territories where they expect to live in single family dwellings or expect to live less densely. So in August, we had just, actually July, we had just passed something that would allow us to build more housing more readily in Maui in particular. And then the wildfires happened. And so there was a huge backlash around, no, we're not going to start these environmental regulations. You're not going to take our homes, which is what that was seen as at that time. According to the government, no, that was never the plan. That's not what we meant. The director of housing has since resigned, and the governor is working with other people to work on that. But yeah, we're in a volatile situation around what's the appropriate response to housing people, to building housing, to building sustainably so that we can maintain this chain of islands that has survived for thousands of years with human habitation and didn't have these problems until the last few hundred, right? These are new problems that we're dealing with that are the byproducts of disaster capitalism. There's no way to get around that. I'd say one of the other issues is, like many, especially here in Honolulu, one of the issues that we sometimes run into is that there is an actual war on the homeless instead of a war on poverty and marking up real estate, right? And so this is a place, again, like LA, where they're sometimes throwing away people's tents or passing increasingly more restrictive laws to, like I live in Waikiki. My best neighbors are sometimes the houseless folks who are making sure that they know, they're like auntie down the street, right? They know everyone who belongs here. They know who the tourists are and aren't. They're looking out for all the things we need. And I'll glibly say, yeah, keep the property values low so people can live here. I don't have a problem with that.
I've preached a lot about how in the Americas and in Hawaii, Alaska, thousands and 12, I think the estimates are somewhere between, 12 and 14,000 years humans lived in harmony with the land. And I said this in front of someone who's a little more to the right than me, who said, oh, well, they were fighting each other. I said, I didn't say they lived in harmony with each other. I said they lived in harmony with the land. They managed, the water stayed clean. Plants, it was not this, you call it disaster capitalism, which is another, we need to stop saying capitalism. This isn't farmers market capitalism that's fucking everything up. It's disaster capitalism, it's violent extractive capitalism. We need to name it what it is. Thank you very much.
Yes, precisely.
What is the biggest thing that surprised you moving to Hawaii?
I say this a lot. how much it was like LA. You know,
I'm just surprised. Now,
I felt like I hadn't moved at all. People were just like, so like, are you like really in culture shock? And I'm just like, no, this feels, you know, the surf culture is the same, you know, again, with LA being the largest population of Native Hawaiians right now, right? So culturally they're becoming more and more similar. People are a lot more laid back. They're even more chill than they are in Southern California. You know, I grew up Black, and so I was used to taking off my shoes to go into people's homes, and people were just like, was that weird for you? I'm just like, no, I'm finally living in a place where the cultural norms support what I grew up with, as opposed to like that awkward moment when I go into someone else's house. Am I supposed to? I don't just want to be in my socks. If you don't want me in my socks, I know that can be, you know, but no, here, even if people like live in a house, you take off your shoes before you enter their house. There's a place to put your shoes. So I really liked that, and I was not prepared for, you know, just how prepared I already was to live here. There are also some other things, you know, on the actual like shock and awe side. These lands are stunningly beautiful. Just primordially beautiful, just rock and cliff faces you can't imagine. Really good policies around development that have kept large swaths of all of the islands just wild. They are just, you know, impassable types of cliffs and trees and vegetation. It rains every day. There are rainforests within, you know, navigable distance. There are black sand beaches on the Big Island because, you know, Pele has come down and touched the ocean. Pele is our volcano goddess, and you know it's and there are signs that say, "Don't disturb Pele. Do not take the sand." Just the amount of connection and the depth of connection that even people who weren't raised here feel to maintaining the wildness of this space, the primordial beauty, the primordial understanding that this land goes back further than human imagination. And one of the foundational texts in Hawaiian spirituality is the Kumulipo, which tells a very different creation story from many of the others that you'll hear around the world. That talks about, you know, the creation of the dark and the not so dark and the very light, and very different versions of understanding how all of the sea creatures came to exist. Things that lead me to believe that I believe the Native Hawaiians watched more than one of the islands actually form, and wrote about it in the poetry that is so characteristic of the Hawaiian language. You know, it's a language that has 13 letters and words that the same word can mean 20 different words. And so there's a way that they've storied these islands into being, and the language itself is in harmony with the natural world. Yeah, so that was something I really wasn't prepared for. It's a beautiful place to live in, that's beautiful from a cultural level, from you know, a panentheistic level. Everything has spirit here, and you know, a place that is still being created before our eyes. Like we can see the volcanic shoot that's forming in the 9th island that will be here in a few thousand years, but that's not the way it looks a lot of other places. You know, we don't always see that we are still forming, and so is the world.
That's beautiful.
Well, and you know, I did a little bit of study of Native Hawaiian spirituality in the context of like an eco-justice ethic, and just that notion that we, not only does everything have spirit, the rocks and the ocean and the mountains and the volcanoes and the trees and but everything is related to us. They are our siblings in certain ways. And so there's a connection that is not just, oh, that's gorgeous, but oh, that's my gorgeous sibling. And it's palpable there.
Mhm.
I mean, I haven't
Yeah,
been
and-
in 15 years, and I can still remember it. So,
yeah, I mean, one of the things that even made me consider this posting when our congregation here on island was looking for potentially someone who could do both religious education and regular preaching was that I'd had my own mystical experiences with this space. I just felt so deeply connected to nature, and I could hear ancestors' voice calling to me, and not my own ancestors. The island ancestors were having a dialogue with me that I'll be honest, just kind of like it scared me. I was raised in a humanist congregation, and I was having a deeply mystical experience that happened more than once, and I was not fully prepared for. It was one of those moments where I had to logic my way through it. Where I was just like, well, I say I believe these things can happen, and now it is happening, and so I guess it's happening. It was one of those things, but it's a place where I went to nature camps as a preteen and adolescent, and I've grown more deeply connected to nature throughout my lifetime, even though I'm primarily metropolitan. Slap me in Eddie City and send me to the club. It's what I want to do. But I will still occasionally go for a hike or like a Rock Creek swim, those types of things. And what you're bringing up, Michael, one of the tales in Native Hawaiian spirituality is about Taro being the brother of man, which might have its roots in, again, where the poetry ends and the truth telling begins is often not important to Hawaiian culture. It's can you get truth out of the story is more important than whether the story is true or not. And that's what they'll tell you in a variety of different ways. But we believe that story is related to one of the ali'i, a queen, one of the chiefs who had a child who was stillborn, and then planted that child in a taro crop. And so we now have a relationship, humans and taro, together because of that. So the word kapua, which means flower, also means offspring because of that relationship.
beautiful.
My one trip to Maui in my whole life, nope, not Maui, Oahu. Actually, we were, the UUA sent a group of people, and the UU at UCC, United Church of Christ, it was a training of trainers. Is that right? Training of trainers for our whole lives. So I was there in 2018, 17?
Yeah, one of those.
I think 20, yeah, one of them.
What a
Maybe
horrible
18.
assignment that you had to take.
Listen, I got jury duty about a week before I was supposed to go, and I have a hardship. So the judge, because she was bored that day, started asking me questions. She goes, "Well, what's your hardship?" I said, "Well, I have to go to a training." "Well, what's your training?" I said, "Well, like sexuality education." She goes, "And where is the training?" And I'm like, "Hawaii." She went, "Where?" And I'm like, "Hawaii." And she goes, "Well, that doesn't sound like a hardship." Like, it's the one and only training that may not happen for another 10 years. Can I please go? You're on. I did not give that much sass, I assure you, because I wanted to get my ass to Hawaii. So after the whole courtroom laughed at that, she gave me the hardship, and I did not have to miss the training of trainers in Oahu, and it was truly spectacular. So it was really, yeah.
Well, I've back to that sort of sacred, the mystical experience. There are any number of places that I've been where the place
Mm-hmm.
has felt to me imbued with a spirit that is palpable there, and Pali, which is right up the road from Lahaina, is one of those places that I've been, where it's like it's almost startling
Yes.
to feel it, that yes, you're having a conversation with ancestors that are not yours. I love that. I love that that way of looking at it, because that definitely is what it felt like.
Yeah, and they'll make themselves known because, again, thousands of years of living in this space that is their home with no shame, with no European referent, with that type of stuff. And I'm glad you brought up the UCC Asia, because obviously they're part of this story. We're all part of this story. During the period pre-Unitarian heresy, we were doing a lot of the work of being missionaries on these islands together. And so UCC congregations, United Church of Christ congregations, are celebrating sometimes 200 years on island. And so this has made news recently about so let's talk about what that means and why we're here. And so one of the things that we've run into is the United Church of Christ, and then the Unitarians, primarily the Universalists, did not really have a stronghold out here. Their missionary efforts were primarily restricted to the continental U.S., right? What their missionary work was moving out west into the prairies during the same period as the Unitarians and the United Church of Christ. Then just Congregationalists are doing work here on the islands. The Bible exists in Hawaiian because we took Native Hawaiians and brought them to Harvard, again, the seminary that Congregationalists decided to form. And so we're a deep part of this history, and we're dealing with the fact that, yes, even here, the doctrine of discovery, which gave Europeans large access, according to the Catholic Church, to lands of non-Christian peoples, informs federal and public policy here. The same doctrine was why the U.S. felt that it could imperialize this place. Yes, there were indigenous schools. We took Native Hawaiians from their lands and put them in state-run schools, often religiously run. The UCC, the United Church of Christ, did that more here than we did. Our schools, where we did that as Unitarians, were primarily in Utah. That's where we ran indigenous schools. And again, this project went on to the 1960s, 1970s. And as I mentioned earlier in our chat, it was illegal to speak Hawaiian in schools until 1984, which is something that the territorial governorship enforced. Isha mentioned earlier about Dole. One of the issues we have here is Hawaiians were some of the most educated people in the world pre-European contact. At the point of the Europeans really starting to exert influence over here, there were something like 200 Native Hawaiian newspapers. The Queen had made sure that there was literacy. They redesigned the teaching of the language around the Japanese syllabary. So there's something we call the hakalama, which is how every possible syllable combination that exists in Hawaiian is taught to preschoolers. And so at a moment's notice, if you're literate in Hawaiian, you can read any word. You don't have to decipher it. There are no silent letters in Hawaiian. They've made it point blank and explicit. And so, again, highly literate people that were not allowed to utilize their culture by law, but also they had seen to it only Native Hawaiians were allowed to own land. So the robber barons of the late 19th and early 20th centuries started marrying into Hawaiian families and then stole their land. So yes, the Dole family are Hawaiians because they married a Hawaiian family, and that's how they got their land.
Well, we could probably tell these stories and delve into the culture of Hawaii and Native Hawaiians and the history of colonization there and the consequences still that we could probably make this a 4-hour show and still be talking at the end of it.
Gladly.
And yet it is 12:59 p.m. here on the East Coast. It looks like the sun has come up there in Honolulu. So this has brought us to the end of another episode of the Voices of Unitarian Universalism. We are so thankful that you have
Thank you, Greg,
with us today.
Having me.
Next week, I believe, we have the Worthy Now prison ministry team from our very own Church of the Larger Fellowship coming on to talk to us about ministry to and with the now over 1,700 incarcerated Unitarian Universalist members that CLF serves. So we're looking forward to that. It was rescheduled from a couple weeks ago, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here. Bye for now.
And there's my dog.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.